Hey, buddy, hit that subscribe. Just a sec for you, but it means the world to me. The day I walked out of that courtroom, breathing free air again, was the same day my own daughter's lives finally started falling apart. Cold rain tapped against the glass outside my lawyer's office, that sharp Vancouver chill sinking straight into my bones. I stood there quietly, hands shaking, trying to wrap my head around one simple fact. I had just survived something that almost erased me. 22 months behind bars. 22 months stolen for a crime I never committed. Concrete walls, buzzing lights, and betrayal that tasted worse than rust in your mouth. My name is Richard Hale. I'm 63 years old, and everything I built over 4 decades was taken from me in one single morning. For 40 years, I built Hale Marine Supply from scratch. No handouts, no shortcuts. My late wife, Margaret, stood beside me through every late night and missed holiday. We weren't flashy people, just grinders. When cancer took her 5 years ago, I buried myself in work because grief doesn't ask permission. The only thing I had left besides a company was my daughter, Lauren. Even now, saying her name feels like swallowing broken glass. But to understand how deep this mess goes, you gotta rewind to where the nightmare actually started. It was a Tuesday morning in early spring. Cherry blossoms popping along the street like nothing was wrong with the world. I got to the office early, coffee still hot, reviewing reports because we just landed a massive contract worth millions. This was the kind of deal that puts a company on the map. Lauren had been our CFO for years. Smart, polished, MBA, the whole deal. I trusted her with every number that mattered. Her husband, Evan, worked in tech consulting, always talking about systems and efficiency. I thought he was harmless. Turns out that was my first mistake. That morning, Lauren walked into my office with Evan and 2 police officers. No warning, no hesitation. Her voice was ice cold when she said, "Dad, we need to talk." Before I could even stand up, they told me I was under investigation for funneling nearly $1 million out of my own company. Offshore accounts, fake vendors, emails with my digital signature approving payments. My lungs locked up. I looked straight at my daughter and said, "Lauren, you handle the finances. You know I'd never do this." She didn't blink, just said she discovered everything weeks earlier and had no choice but to report me. She even cried on cue. Academy Award-level performance. They arrested me right there in my own office. Employees watched like I was some kind of criminal mastermind instead of a man who signed their paycheck for decades. Evan wrapped an arm around Lauren and told the officers they were just protecting their child's future. That line hit harder than the cuffs snapping around my wrists. In that moment, I realized I wasn't just being accused. I was being replaced. Bail was set so high it might as well have been a joke. Every asset I owned was frozen. The only way out was if Lauren approved a company-backed loan. She refused, said she had to think about her daughter. So I sat in a detention center for months, waiting for a trial I knew was stacked against me. My lawyer was overwhelmed. The evidence looked airtight. Bank records, invoices, emails, all fake, all clean, all designed to bury me. And the person leading the charge against me? My own child. When the guilty verdict came down, it felt unreal, like watching someone else's life get wrecked. 3 years, prison, ruined reputation. I went from running a multi-million-dollar company to sleeping on a paper-thin mattress, listening to guards bark orders. Lauren sent me one letter. She said she hoped I'd reflect. I wrote back one sentence. "I'm innocent, and I'll prove it." She never replied. But prison didn't just take from me. It gave me something I didn't expect. A chance encounter. A man who noticed the cracks no one else did. And once those cracks started showing, everything began to unravel in ways my daughter never saw coming. What Lauren didn't know was that behind those prison walls, I was learning the truth piece by piece. And the closer I got, the more dangerous the truth became. Prison has a funny way of stripping you down to nothing but time and thoughts. No phones, no control, just long days where every sound echoes a little too loud. At first, I stayed quiet, kept my head low. That place was full of guys who made bad choices on purpose. I wasn't one of them, but the system didn't care. To them, I was just another old man who got caught skimming his own company. But here's the thing about being locked up with nothing to lose. You start paying attention. That's where I met Tom Harris. Late 60s, sharp eyes, calm voice. Didn't act like your typical inmate. We ended up in the same vocational class, sanding wood and killing time. One day, he asked what I was in for. I told him everything. The offshore accounts, the fake vendors, the emails that proved I was dirty. He didn't interrupt, just listened. When I finished, he shook his head slowly and said something that stuck with me. That setup is way too clean. Real thieves get sloppy. This was built by someone who knows how investigations work. Turns out, Tom used to be a forensic accountant before his own fall from grace. Not proud of how he ended up inside, but the man knew fraud like surgeons know anatomy. He started asking questions that my lawyers never did. Who had admin access to the email system? Who handled day-to-day payments? Who benefited right after the money disappeared? I didn't like where the answers were pointing, so I pushed back. Told him my daughter wasn't capable of something that calculated. Tom just raised an eyebrow and said, "Maybe not alone, but nobody pulls a job like that without help." From that point on, prison stopped being just a cage. It became a classroom. Tom taught me how paper trails lie, how money hops through shell companies, how digital fingerprints don't disappear, they just get buried. We spent hours in the library, going over case studies, learning how fraudsters manipulate timestamps and metadata. I filed requests for every piece of evidence used against me. Page by page, line by line, we combed through it like hunters tracking blood in snow. That's when the cracks started showing. The offshore account in my name was supposedly open on a day I wasn't even in the country. I had receipts, flight records, photos. Impossible for me to be there. The invoices from so-called suppliers, the formatting was off. Fonts didn't match. Registration numbers belonged to real companies, just not the ones listed. Someone had copy-pasted legitimacy and slapped fake names on it. Clean enough to fool a rushed investigation. Sloppy enough for someone who knew where to look. But the real smoking gun came from the emails. On the surface, they were sent from my office computer. That's what convicted me. But buried in the metadata was something else. The IP addresses traced back to a residential area. Same neighborhood where my daughter and her husband lived. Worse, the emails were created during a period when I was working from home, and the office was nearly empty. Guess who still had full access to my computer during that time? Guess who had the technical knowledge to log in remotely and make it look legit? I felt sick, not because I was surprised, but because deep down, part of me already knew. The betrayal wasn't a moment. It was a plan, months of planning, smiles at family dinners, lies stacked on lies, and all of it pointed back to the people who stood closest to me. Still, knowing wasn't enough. I was stuck behind bars with no money and a felony on my record. Proof doesn't matter unless someone with power is willing to listen. That's when the call came. A voice from my past I hadn't heard in decades. An old business partner who'd seen my name in the news and knew something didn't add up. He said he wanted to help. Said he knew a lawyer who specialized in tearing wrongful convictions apart piece by piece. For the first time since the cell door slammed shut behind me, I felt something dangerous rise in my chest. Hope. What I didn't know yet was that once real professionals got involved, the money trail would expose a truth so ugly it would shatter my family forever. The lawyer showed up at the prison like a storm wearing a suit. Rachel Porter didn't waste time with sympathy or small talk. Former prosecutor, sharp as a blade, eyes that missed nothing. She sat across from me in the visiting room, spread my notes out on the table, and listened while I walked her through everything Tom and I had uncovered. When I finished, she leaned back and said, "You didn't just get framed, you got professionally erased." That was the moment I knew this fight was finally real. Rachel brought in people who actually knew what they were doing. A private investigator who smelled lies from a mile away. A digital forensics expert who spoke in code and timestamps like it was a second language. They weren't guessing. They were hunting. Within weeks, they confirmed what Tom suspected. The emails had been backdated. The digital signatures were cloned. Someone used administrator-level access to walk right through my company security like it was their own living room. Then the investigator hit gold. Evan's consulting business was bleeding money right before the embezzlement started. Bad investments. Crypto gone sideways. Credit maxed out. He was drowning. And then, like magic, the debts vanished. New house. New car. No explanation. Money doesn't appear out of thin air. It moves. And when we followed where it moved, it led straight back to my company. The offshore account wasn't the final stop. It was a laundromat. Funds bounced through shell companies, then split. One chunk went into a U.S.-based holding company tied to Evan. Another went into an investment account under my daughter's maiden name. But the third transfer hit harder than anything else. It went into a college fund. Not for them. For their kid, my granddaughter. That wasn't just theft. That was cold, calculated insurance. They figured no court would rip money out of a child's future. That's when my anger turned quiet. And quiet anger is the most dangerous kind. Rachel moved fast. She filed for an appeal based on new evidence and demanded a full review. The prosecution fought back hard. Nobody likes admitting they locked up the wrong guy, especially when the case looked clean. But clean cases don't crumble this fast under pressure. The deeper the investigation went, the uglier it got. IP logs, remote access, financial spikes that lined up perfectly with stolen funds. It wasn't a theory anymore. It was a map. The appeal hearing was the first time I saw my daughter again in nearly 2 years. She didn't look confident anymore. She looked tired, cornered. When the judges started asking questions, her story cracked. She stumbled over dates, over numbers she used in no code. Evan wouldn't even look at me. He knew. They both did. The lie that put me in prison was collapsing in public. 2 weeks later, the decision came down. Miscarriage of justice. Conviction overturned. Immediate release. I walked out of that courthouse thinner, older, and angry in ways I didn't know were possible. Freedom tasted strange after being told for so long I didn't deserve it. But Rachel wasn't done. Not even close. She looked at me and said, "Now we make them answer for every second they stole from you." Criminal charges were filed within days. Fraud, conspiracy, perjury, forgery. Search warrants followed. Their phones, their laptops, their home. Investigators found emails planning the setup months before it happened. Notes, draft invoices, step-by-step breakdowns of how to destroy me without getting their hands dirty. They didn't panic when I was arrested. They celebrated. They thought the story was over. They were wrong. Because when the handcuffs snapped onto my daughter's wrists, the real price of betrayal was finally about to be paid. The knock on their door came early in the morning. That's how it always goes when the truth finally shows up. No warning. No second chances. Just badges, warrants, and the sound of a lie collapsing in real time. I wasn't there when they arrested my daughter and her husband, but I saw the footage later. The same cold professionalism. The same words I'd heard years earlier. Only this time, I wasn't the one in cuffs. Lauren tried to hold it together at first. She told the officers there had to be some kind of misunderstanding. Evan stayed silent, eyes darting around the room, already calculating exits that didn't exist. Their devices were seized, their account frozen. And just like that, the comfort they'd built on my back vanished. Watching it from the outside felt surreal. I didn't feel joy. I felt tired. The kind of tired that comes from knowing none of this ever had to happen. Their bail hearing was almost poetic. The prosecution called them flight risks with proven experience hiding assets offshore. Sound familiar? Bail was set sky high. Evan's parents scrambled, mortgaged their house to get him out. Lauren wasn't so lucky. She spent weeks sitting in a cell, waiting, staring at the same concrete walls I once did. When our eyes met across the courtroom, I saw it. Not anger, not hatred. Fear. Pure, naked fear. The trial moved fast, because the evidence didn't play games. Emails outlining the plan. Timelines showing when they practiced their stories. Digital logs proving remote access. Financial records tracing stolen money into their lifestyle. Evan tried to flip first, offering to testify against Lauren. Said she pressured him. Said he was just a tech guy. The court didn't buy it. This wasn't a moment of weakness. This was a partnership. They planned together. They executed together. They profited together. Sitting in that courtroom, listening to my daughter's messages get read aloud, was worse than prison. I recognized her tone. Calm, organized, ruthless. The same tone she used in board meetings. Except now, it was aimed at destroying me. When the jury came back guilty on every count, she didn't cry. She just stared straight ahead like she was already doing the math on how much time she'd lose. Sentencing hit hard. Evan got more years. Lauren got less, but not mercy. As they were led away, she turned and looked at me. For half a second, she opened her mouth like she wanted to say something. I don't know if it was sorry or help me. Either way, it was too late. Some bridges don't just burn. They turn to ash. But the hardest part wasn't the convictions. It was what came next. The court ordered restitution. Every stolen dollar had to be accounted for. That included the college fund, set up in my granddaughter's name. The lawyer told me we could reclaim it easily. Legally clean. No debate. I stared at the paperwork for a long time. That money came from my pain. But it wasn't meant for revenge. I made a decision that shocked everyone in the room. I left the fund untouched. Put it in a locked trust. Named myself as the only trustee. Not one penny for her parents. Only education, therapy, and support, because whatever sins her parents committed, she didn't deserve to pay for them. That was the moment I truly won. Not in court, but in character. Still, the story wasn't finished. Because fixing my life didn't just mean watching them fall. It meant rebuilding what they almost destroyed. My company, my legacy, and the one relationship that mattered more than all of it. What happened next wasn't about money or prison time. It was about facing the one person who'd been silently watching it all unfold. I didn't see my granddaughter for almost 2 years. Not a single birthday. Not a single school play. Just photos that stopped coming once the story about me turned ugly. When the court finally allowed a supervised visit, my hands were shaking worse than they ever did in prison. I'd faced guards, judges, and inmates twice my size without blinking. But walking into that room felt heavier than all of it combined. She was taller than I remembered. Thinner. Eyes too serious for a kid her age. The moment she saw me, she froze, like she wasn't sure she was allowed to feel happy. Then she ran, wrapped her arms around me so tight I could barely breathe. "I'm sorry, Grandpa," she whispered, like she'd been carrying that weight alone. That broke me. I told her the truth, the only truth that mattered. None of this was your fault, not even a little. She told me things no child should have to carry. How she heard her parents practicing what to say before my arrest. How adults kept telling her I was a bad guy, but it never felt right. How she had nightmares about police taking people away. I listened. I didn't interrupt. Prison taught me how powerful silence can be when someone finally feels safe enough to speak. Those visits became the highlight of my week. Science museums, walks in the park, ice cream runs where we talked about everything and nothing. I told her stories about her grandmother, about how we built the business together, about mistakes I made and lessons I learned. Slowly, trust grew back. Not forced, not rushed, real. Meanwhile, I took back control of my company. New leadership, new financial safeguards. No single person ever holds all the keys again. I set up a scholarship fund in my wife's name. Turned pain into something useful. Something that couldn't be twisted against me again. At night, I slept in my own bed, still waking up sometimes thinking I heard cell doors slam. Healing doesn't move on your schedule. It moves when it's ready. Letters came from prison. My daughter wrote about regret, fear, and bad choices. Her husband wrote excuses. I didn't respond. Forgiveness isn't performance. It's a process. And I wasn't there yet. Maybe I never will be. Some damage doesn't heal clean. And that's okay. One afternoon, my granddaughter asked me a question that stopped me cold. "Grandpa, was it worth it? Fighting so hard." I thought about the years I lost. The reputation that almost vanished. The family dinners that never happened. Then I looked at her and said, "It wasn't about winning. It was about telling the truth and not letting lies decide who I am." She nodded like she understood more than her age should allow. Kids are like that. They see through noise. They always have. That's when I realized something important. Justice didn't end when the verdict came down. It ended when she felt safe again. But there was still one final loose end. One final choice I had to make that would decide how this story truly ended. Because forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting, and the last chapter was still waiting to be written. I'm older now. Not just in years, but in miles traveled the hard way. Prison adds weight you can't see. It sits in your shoulders, in the way you double-check doors, in the silence you carry longer than you should. But every morning I wake up free, make my coffee, and remind myself that I didn't let the worst thing that happened to me define who I became after. The company is mine again. Every share, every decision. I rebuilt it with one rule burned into stone. No blind trust, no matter how much blood you share. That lesson cost me 2 years of my life, and I won't pay it twice. We've got layers of oversight now. Transparency everywhere. The business is stronger than it's ever been. Not because I'm smarter, but because I'm no longer naive. My granddaughter is the center of everything. Her future is locked down tight, protected by professionals who answer to no one's emotions, only her best interests. We talk every week, sometimes about school, sometimes about her grandmother, sometimes about nothing important at all. And that's the point. Peace lives in the ordinary moments you almost lose forever. People ask me if I'll ever forgive my daughter. I don't give them the answer they want. Forgiveness isn't a deadline. It's not a checkbox. It's not something you owe someone just because they share your last name. She didn't just steal money. She stole time, freedom, trust. She made a choice knowing exactly what it would cost me. That's not an accident. That's character. I don't hate her. Hate takes energy I'd rather spend living. But I don't pretend either. Accountability matters. Consequences matter. If you erase that, you teach the next generation that love excuses everything. It doesn't. Love means telling the truth, even when it burns. Sometimes my granddaughter asks about her parents. I never poison her heart. I tell her they made terrible choices and are paying for them. I tell her people can be broken and still be loved from a distance. And I tell her the one thing I wish someone had told me earlier in life. Trust is built, not inherited. When I walk by the marina now and watch the boats drift out, I think about how close I came to losing it all. How easy it would have been to give up, to accept the label they slapped on me and fade out quietly. But I didn't. I fought. I learned. I waited. And when the truth finally showed up, it didn't whisper. It roared. The day I walked out of that courtroom wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming my name. And the people who tried to bury me learned something the hard way. You can steal money. You can steal time. But you can't steal a man's with a stand back up. I'm still standing. Still building. Still choosing truth over bitterness. And that's the one thing they never saw coming.